We begin in Washington, D.C. CBS News has new reporting that dozens of Democratic lawmakers could issue statements calling for President Biden to step down for the presidential race over the next 48 hours. Already, 17 House Democrats and 1 Senate Democrat have called for the president to step aside. It's creating division within the party.
Ask yourself that question. Are you sure? Because you're not just gambling your own political reputation. You are gambling the future of the United States of America.
But even if you think that he's a few points down, that doesn't mean that the race is not winnable. Ultimately, the race is going to come down not just to who's the best talker, but who do people trust on the economy.
I've been asking him to do more town hall style meetings because I think that he performs well when he interacts with people. And I think people feel better about him when they're allowed to interact with him.
We have team coverage to cover reaction for this with Nancy Cordes at the White House. We're going to begin with CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion in Washington. Nikole, we've also learned House Minority Leader Jeffries met with President Biden last night. What can you tell us?
Well, what we can tell you is that this was a meeting that was in the works for some time from the standpoint that Leader Jeffries has been conducting this listening tour of members over the better part of almost 2 weeks, meeting with leadership, meeting with progressives, meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus, ranking members. And so, as he noted to members today in a statement, he says that in his conversations with the president, he directly expressed the full breadth of insight and heartfelt sentiments from his colleagues. But as I said, you know, he has really been intentional about trying to really make sure that he is hearing members fully out and was hoping to convey that at some point to the president. And as CBS News previously reported earlier this week, we were expecting that that conversation was going to happen by today. And as we learned in that Dear Colleague letter that the leader sent out to members a short time ago, that transpired last night.
Nancy, what is the White House saying about Biden's speech last night?
They're telling us that they feel good about the press conference. They feel that the president was able to kind of show his breadth of knowledge on a number of foreign policy topics, but also that he made an energetic case for his own candidacy and why he wants to stay in this race and continue to be president for another 4 years. It had been a full day for him at the NATO conference. Then he did this press conference, and now we know that he came back here to the White House and met with Leader Jeffries here at the White House for an unspecified length of time. And it sounds like White House officials are pretty happy with how that meeting went. Obviously, what Jeffries had to share with the president wasn't all great news because we know that he has many members, particularly frontline members, members who are in those swing districts who are especially worried that the president could continue to lose support and that could hurt them in their races. But then you saw James Clyburn, who, like Jeffries, is a member of leadership, going out this morning and saying that he's still firmly on the president's side. And that seemed to be a signal from leadership to rank and file members about where leadership, at least, is standing right now. And while, yes, it is possible that we could see more defections, and the White House certainly is prepared for that possibility, they feel that the president's performance last night may have done enough to head some of those defections off.
And they're fundraising off of his response to one of your questions about his legacy, saying, I'm not in it for my legacy, I'm in it to finish the job. And Nancy, what is the White House and what are his campaigns saying about some of his slip-ups last night?
Well, they acknowledge that it wasn't great, that right off the top of the press conference, the president mixed up the names of Kamala Harris and President Trump. He had also done it a couple of hours earlier when he was with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He called him Vladimir Putin, but then quickly corrected himself. They say, look, he's certainly not the only person who's done that. Barack Obama has mixed up a name before. Certainly President Trump has done it. And they kind of said, are you going to judge him based on that one slip up, or are you going to judge him based on an entire hour-long press conference where he took questions on a wide variety of subjects from 11 journalists? So, they acknowledge it wasn't a great moment, but overall they feel very good about the press conference. They feel that he was able to show his knowledge and that he was able to show more vigor and more enthusiasm, certainly, than he did in the debate a couple of weeks ago.
Nikole, since we did have a handful of lawmakers after last night's press conference come out and add their voices to the growing list of Democrats asking for him to step aside, do your sources tell you that their minds were made up before the NATO summit, or that what they heard and they saw at that press conference irked them?
Well, obviously, we saw the statement from Congressman Jim Himes, which dropped, about 2 minutes after the press conference ended. I mean, in terms of him, he had expressed some reservations about the president's ability to remain on the ticket, which was conveyed in a ranking member call earlier in the week. So, in his case, perhaps this is something he's been giving thought to over the last couple of days. But, look, there are other members that have told me they were kind of looking to this press conference, but also looking to see what else the president does, on the campaign trail, how he handles himself in other unscripted settings. So it could have been something where it was predetermined for some members, but others still are kind of weighing their options and kind of taking this all in totality. I will note that CBS News has learned that the political arm of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Bold PAC, is holding a call with the president today. A source confirms to CBS News. This is something that we also knew was in the works, with a senator telling me earlier in this week that that was something that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus was working on. We do know that the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the deputy chair issued a statement of support for the president earlier this week. So just yet another sign that the president is continuing to try to do more outreach to various congressional members in the wake of this press conference as he continues to carry out a number of events.
Nancy, President Biden is heading to Michigan today for a campaign event. What's on his agenda, and are there any plans, as more lawmakers call, to hear from him more, say, in a town hall setting? Any plans right now for something like that?
Well, I'm told that the president is holding more conference calls and Zooms this morning that are campaign related. We don't know exactly with who yet, but we're tracking that. And I'm also told that this rally in Michigan, he'll be with a variety of Michigan lawmakers who are actually traveling with him on Air Force One to the rally. So he'll have an opportunity to talk with them on Air Force One. But beyond that, we don't have any word right now of any additional meetings or town halls that he plans to have with members.
Nikole Killion and Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.